Welcome to What Not to Do. I'm Kyle Schmitz, and this is episode 9. I've got pastor and CrossFit coach Jake Spielbauer with me. He's going to tell us what not to do in the grocery store. And for all you Frozen fans, he's going to lay down the Elsa principle, and it has nothing to do with letting go. Hold tight. We'll be right back.
Well, good morning, Jake Spielbauer.
Hello, Kyle.
So I just want to set the stage here. So Jake and I go a long way back. I mean, we were in high school together. I mean, grew up in similar circles. We even played in a band together, which has been awesome. So it's been, maybe the world doesn't need to remember that, but.
Yeah, for some reason, I want to say that my first memory of you was actually in middle school.
Okay.
So this is before we even got to high school, and I want to say that you had a shirt that had an orange on it, and it was like a band. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
it was
like Supertones.
It was a Supertones shirt. I was going to say it was a ska band shirt. And for some reason, I have this image of you wearing a Supertones shirt with a big orange on it. And it was blue, I think.
It was blue.
Had an orange on it.
Wow.
I don't know why that sticks out in my memory, but I think what probably caught me up was, there are very few people who could relate to all the Christian subculture kind of punk and ska bands that I listened to in middle school. So I just thought, wow, Kyle's the coolest. He gets it. He listens to cool music.
It was basically the beginning of eHarmony.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Common interest, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. No. Oh, man. Yeah. Woo. Did I have a beard back then?
No, but you might have been on that path. I know at that point I already had fully developed mutton chops. That was like the first thing to come in for me.
I probably kind of had like a dirty stash, Probably kind of I think I remember having to shave it. Anyway, this is way off topic.
Yeah.
Our listeners are getting a good laugh this morning. So, Jake, you are a pastor. Your husband and father, you are a CrossFit coach. Yeah. But our listeners probably have no idea, for the most part, who you are. So, tell us, man, who are you? Just a bit about yourself, where you hail from, what you're drinking this morning.
Yeah, well, I'm drinking anything with espresso in it this morning. My philosophy is as much caffeine as I can get into my body as possible early in the morning. I've been working as a pastor for about 10 years now.
Yeah.
Here at Lifebridge Christian Church in Green Bay, and this has really been kind of my thing. I grew up in the Green Bay area and went to high school here in Green Bay. I did my undergrad at Marquette University in Milwaukee, and pursued a political science degree there. The Marquette University. We like to, make sure we let people know. Pursued an undergraduate degree in political science, and somehow, kind of through some different circumstances, I ended up taking a job in youth ministry.
So why poli-sci? What was the goal initially?
I think what attracted me to political science was thinking in terms of systems. I think one of the things that is probably fair to say is one of my passions, as well as one of my giftings, is thinking abstractly and thinking strategically. And I actually started, when I started my undergrad, I started in physical therapy and athletic training. And, I enjoyed it. It was great. Had some cool experiences as I pursued that my freshman year. But what really attracted me to studying poli-sci and eventually getting my degree in third world studies and international affairs and economics was I loved thinking about why does the world work the way that it does, and taking a step back to see more aggregate pictures of why people behave the way they do. How do not just individuals but nations interact, and what are the assumptions that shape the way that the world operates in that regard. And I had always just been fascinated in general by a couple things. Notably, I've always had a strong heart for I think people who suffer. And so I, was very drawn to studying why does poverty happen, not just on a micro scale, but on a macro scale. What are the things that happen in the world that create systems in which people are not able to climb out or help themselves.
Interesting.
And so I really enjoyed that. I liked the critical thinking.
Yeah. And the only greater mystery than, how nations, work and relate to one another is teenagers. Right?
Right, yeah.
So you said, I'm going to do youth ministry and solve it all.
That's right, yeah. So, and that's obviously a pretty interesting story in and of itself.
But how'd you get there?
That's what attracted me to studying there. What ended up getting me there was a girl, of course. I mean, of course, the story revolves around a girl.
And it's Valentine's Day for our listeners.
Yeah, that's right.
And you can't see, we've got a very beautiful bouquet of, I guess, would you call that maybe purple, pink?
Yeah, there's some magenta hue. Yeah.
Flowers here on the table for us, and we're at Copper State Brewing Company drinking some Copper Rock coffee. So, but so it was a girl. Yeah,
I met my wife in 8th grade, and we were friends for a long time. She came kind of crashing back into my life.
Did she have an OC Supertones shirt on?
She did not. She was not. I was kind of the scummy punk rock skateboarding kid, and she was very clean cut. It was. Kind of one of those stereotypical teen romances, except I was interested and she wasn't for the better part of a decade. So she came kind of crashing back into my life my sophomore year of college, and when we started dating, I started attending church with her when I was home on the weekends. And through that, I built a relationship with the senior pastor at what was then First Christian Church in Green Bay, but is now LifeBridge. And so as I was preparing to graduate from college, I had a few different job opportunities. I had an internship lined up doing organizational work in Milwaukee. I had an offer from a family friend to go into finance and pursue a finance degree and work for their business. And then, kind of at the last minute, we had this crazy offer on the table to say, hey, our youth pastor is going on the mission field, so would you consider maybe moving to Green Bay and taking a job in student ministry, which made zero sense. But as we prayed about it, we felt really confident that this is where the Lord wanted us to go. And so we did what every college kid dreams of. We left Milwaukee, where we had lived our first year of marriage, moved in with my in-laws and lived in the basement, and took a job working with high school students. And ever since then, I think it's just been a crash course of kind of learning on the job, because this is not a career path that, as I was making my way through middle school and high school, if anyone had asked me what I was going to do with my life, this wouldn't have been a route that I would have even, considered.
Yeah.
So,
and all those aptitude tests, the youth pastor didn't show up.
That doesn't commonly show up on those strength finder type things in high school.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're married now.
Yeah.
Do you have little Spielbauers running around?
We have 5 little Spielbauers running around.
Awesome.
Yeah, we've got four daughters.
Wonderful.
And 1 little boy. And they're
so great.
They're great. They're phenomenal. They're a tool of God's refining work in my life all the time. And nothing's challenged me to grow as a man more than the task of being a husband and a father.
Yeah, it's a terrifying privilege.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's good. So you aren't still the youth pastor, though, at LifeBridge? Yeah, so talk to us about the recent transition that you took over responsibilities to be the preaching pastor.
Yeah, so I served in student ministry for 9 years, and what I've always said about that job was I was happy to do student ministry forever. I love student ministry, and one of the things that I appreciate about students is students a lot of times haven't learned to fake it like adults have, and so a lot of times the conversations that we get to have in youth group, I'd say, man, I wish we could have these types of conversations, this type of honesty, this type of authenticity, all throughout the church, and sometimes I found that students seem to have an easier time kind of letting those walls down. So I was in student ministry for 9 years. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. Got to have some amazing experiences. And a few years ago, as our senior pastor started looking at retirement and what his transition to retirement was going to look like, we started having conversations about what it might, how it might look for me to step into primary preaching pastor role at LifeBridge. And so through those conversations, fall of 2018 was kind of the time when my turn to step up to the plate, and so the church asked me to step into that role, and that's what I've been doing for the past year and a half or so, and it's been one of the hardest things I've ever done, but very much one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, and I love what I do.
Yeah. And you also serve on the board for a school in town.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that.
That's right. I serve on the board for Providence Academy in Green Bay. It's a classical Christian school.
What is
K through 12
classical Christian?
Yeah, classical education, just to break it down real simply, views the student's development in 3 stages, which would be what we'd identify as grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And so kids that are in the grammar stage, when they're younger, basically their minds are just sponges. They soak up facts, figures, and information. And then as they move into middle school and into adolescence, in the logic stage, they start to learn how to connect the dots between, not just what has happened, but why things happen. And finally, we see kind of the final completion of a student's development in the rhetoric stage as they get later into high school, which then teaches them not only to know facts and figures and connect them and see the ideas of kind of how things work and why things happen the way that they do, but then to take the next step and then formulate opinions and be able to give a rational defense for their response to those things. So the way we see these things, work in a student's life is, as they get into high school, not only understanding why the world is the way it is, but then in response, specifically as a Christian, being able to articulate and defend a Christian worldview in response to those things. So, students graduating at Providence Academy, in order to graduate, have to present a thesis to the board, because at that point we expect them to be able to, articulate an argument and defend it. And the benefits, we'd say, of that system of learning is that it naturally kind of caters to a student's development as they grow physically and mentally. It takes advantages of their strength at each stage of development.
Yeah, so that's neat. Is that a new method of education?
Right. So the name is probably a dead giveaway. Classical education is not a new idea. Yeah. In fact, it traces its origins back, to ancient Greek, and kind of the foundations of Western civilization, right? Yeah. And so it's a kind of a traditional, or maybe not a new idea, but we do believe that we're innovators in education by kind of identifying maybe the sense of returning it to these things. And actually, what we've found is, this method tends to work pretty well. Notre Dame just published a study in partnership with the Notre Dame University. Just published a study in partnership with I think it's I'd have to check on this, but Sears Institute? Siersky. Is that the one? I might be wrong on that. I'd have to check that. So forgive me if that reference is wrong. But Notre Dame just published a study comparing classical Xerxes. Sorry. Just published a study comparing students from a classical Christian background to their peers across a number of categories, including educational development, individual kind of personal development, and also spiritual development. And what we've found is the results were kind of stunning. I mean, I think we've always been confident that classical Christian education works, but what we've found is it works exceedingly well, and kind of in just about every measurable category, students who come from a classical Christian background are outperforming their peers. And another example is we just had a program called Reading Connections in the area that measured that has kind of worked to improve literacy scores in a number of different school environments, and we found that 100% of our fourth graders are reading two grade levels above where they currently are. And to give you a frame of reference for kind of how stunning that is, I think just recently here in Wisconsin, the numbers that were published found that 40% of students in Wisconsin are reading at their grade level. So 40% statewide is the average of students that are actually reading at their grade level. But at Providence, we've got 100% of our fourth graders reading 2 grade levels above where they're at. So
that's amazing. So the way that you described it with the 3 stages, I get the method there, but I guess what makes it actually Christian? Like, is classical automatically Christian, or could you have a school that's classical and not Christian, or what? where does the Christian aspect come in?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question. You could absolutely have a classical education that's not in a Christian context. What makes it specifically Christian is Christ, and knowledge of Christ is the foundation of every class, every subject. So one of the things that attracted us to the school, we were planning to homeschool our kids. We were pretty set on that, and we went to a breakfast that Providence had put on, at which our headmaster, his name's Ron, gave a speech about, why Providence. He gave us the pitch.
Yeah.
And he said something that stuck with me forever, and I think that every Christian parent should take to heart in making decisions about their kids' schooling and education. And hey, I'm not the one to say this is what everybody should do. All I'm saying is this is, I think, what we need to wrestle with in making that decision. He said, hey, Colossians is clear that everything was created by, through, and for Jesus Christ. Therefore, to teach any discipline or subject apart from the knowledge of Christ is to teach a lie. Because no discipline can be properly understood without an adequate knowledge of the Creator. Right? Mathematics cannot be taught apart from God because God created mathematics, right? And that's really the idea. And so the idea of classical Christian education is that Christ is the foundation for our study of every discipline. And so as our students are learning about history, for example, my second grade son is learning about ancient Egypt. Well, they're learning about ancient Egypt. He could spit off facts and figures and dates and the names of pharaohs and all this stuff, but then he can also point us to the story of Joseph in Scripture and connecting what we know about history to what the Bible teaches us about.
Not two different histories, but one.
But one unified history. And so Scripture kind of bleeds into and informs our study of all these things.
That's interesting. So it sounds like your work, it's at Providence, is really an extension of your ministry at LifeBridge.
Absolutely.
Would you see that or say
yeah,
that?
I think that's fair to say. I see one of the greatest contributions that I can make with my personal time and effort. I think one of the things we wrestle with as leaders or as people working in public roles is what to do with our time, how to manage our time. And one of the tensions I've always faced is I only have so much time. I've got 24 hours, I've got 7 days, just like everybody else. And so one of the things I've had to do is ask, where is my time best spent?
Yeah.
And where can I invest my time that it's going to have the most yield or the most fruit in terms of effectiveness and I guess also benefits for others. And so if my goal as a pastor, or as I think this is the responsibility of every Christian, is to be productive in advancing God's kingdom, where are my efforts best spent? And I can't think of a better place to spend my efforts than investing in the success of a school that's training students to become godly leaders. Because what we see every student that comes through Providence is being equipped to become a leader in the workplace, a leader in their church, and being trained not to necessarily see themselves as, hey, a bull of a personality that just dominates others. That's not what a leader is, but someone that takes responsibility to lead by example, to pursue excellence in whatever they're doing. If someone graduating from Providence goes on to work, being a custodian at a local company, well, man, they're going to learn to lead as the best possible custodian that they could possibly be.
Probably start their own custodian services.
Right, exactly, and that's really the hope, is we're just training them to pursue excellence. And so, our vision statement at Providence is partnering with parents to create godly, or to help raise godly leaders.
Yeah, so the connection that I see is, with your work at LifeBridge, I'm assuming you guys are teaching the Bible, the Christian worldview on Sundays.
Absolutely.
And then what Providence is doing in your work at Providence is helping people to that tactical, tangible, or application of this. So this is what it means now to be a Christian in all of life.
Right.
It'd be the same thing if someone was a Muslim and they went whatever their form of worship was, and then they were also taught and instructed to, this is what being Muslim looks like every day of the week, right?
Yeah.
Or someone who's an atheist. They don't have I don't think a place of worship, but they might think through, what does it mean to be an atheist in every area of life, Monday through Saturday, whatever it might be. And so from the Christian worldview, from your worldview, you're helping students to grow and be really incredibly consistent with the Christian faith.
That's right.
which is an overflow of your work on Sundays, and then throughout the week, and obviously Providence is doing that dirty work, and you get to be a part of that board to help cast that vision. That's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. So you guys can't see Jake, but he's ripped. He's a CrossFit coach, and that's another one of the things that he does. And how'd your kids? How'd your wives? How'd your husbands?
Stop it.
So how long have you been doing CrossFit?
I've been doing CrossFit since 2012. I work at a gym called True North Performance here in Green Bay.
Cool.
It's a little CrossFit gym. And, I really just do that to maintain my physical health and well-being. And it gives me an opportunity to get outside the church walls and connect with people in a different way. So coaching is an opportunity for me to build relationships and invest in people's lives. And, there's nowhere where people are often more open and just kind of, when you're working out in front of other people or with other people, it's just a very vulnerable place to be. And a lot of times for people, some of the things that we experience, working out and struggling through things, is a lot of times personal stuff comes out. People who are struggling in other areas of life, and so one of the things I really enjoy about coaching is not just the idea of being in the gym helping people get healthy physically, but oftentimes I get the chance to have really awesome, deep conversations with people, because people, when you're out on the gym floor, often people are at their most real, I've found. But also for me, that's really a personal thing for my personal mental health. Awesome. Just maintaining an active lifestyle is really important, and so that's something really enjoyable I get to do.
Sweet. So pastor, CrossFit coach, board member, why? Like, when you wake up in the morning, what keeps you wanting to do these things? What's that pulse inside Jake that says, this is why I do what I do?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I've wrestled with that at times. Something, and we'll get more into this later, something that I've often struggled with is feeling, I've lived a lot of my life doing what I thought I should do, doing what I thought I had to do. And so it hasn't been until later in life that I've gotten to ask the question, what do I want to do? And what's the best thing for me to do that will allow me to pursue my passions? And what am I passionate about? And I've had to really stumble into that, because for my whole life, I never really had a clear picture of that. And probably a lot of people can relate to that, even people listening today. If you'd asked me in high school what I want to be, I would have said, I have no idea. I went to, when I chose my undergraduate major, I opened up their list of, majors, found the one with the highest starting income, said, well, whatever's going to let me make the most money, that's probably what I should do. And that's how I ended up in the physical therapy program. And so,
and a youth pastor, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's definitely started youth ministry for the money. And I really had to wrestle with feeling pressure to do things. I do things because I think I should, maybe even at times because I thought, hey, well, this is what God wants me to do, so I have to do it. And I've really been able to take
people imposing expectations.
There are other people imposing expectations, and what I felt would reflect well on me, reflect well on my family. But I've really had the chance to step back and ask myself that question: why am I doing what I'm doing? And all I can think of is, when I die, many of the material things that I've done are simply going to fall by the ash heap of eternal insignificance. But if I'm able to do something that will help others to know Christ, I guess really how I view it is, if my legacy can be investing in other people, in helping them experience transformation in their lives, I've realized that a lot of the things that I've done from a material standpoint, a lot of things that I'm going to do materially are going to fall on what I've heard referred to as the ash heap of eternal insignificance. And that means that a lot of the things that I accrue, the kind of the physical things around me are temporary, and when I die, they're going to be left here or go with me, whatever.
From dust to dust, right?
Dust to dust, man. But the one thing that does last beyond my life is what I've done for others. And if I can, in some way, work towards helping other people experience transformation, or give my time and effort to helping them, those are things that last beyond my life. And, I think it's important for each one of us to think about what kind of legacy we're leaving. And even with how, I help lead our staff as a pastor, I want my legacy to be not that, hey, I was a great leader and, all this stuff and was successful in my areas of ministry. What I want to leave as a legacy is I helped other people be successful. All of us have a coaching tree. Whether we recognize it or not, we all leave an impact on others. The question is, are we doing it on purpose and are we doing it well? Yep. And so I can look back in my life and see the influence of other people that have really invested in me and how important that was to my development. And I guess I think back and say, man, I hope when I'm on my deathbed that there are people, maybe even that I've never met, that because of the way that I've lived, that will benefit from hopefully the way that I've helped others. Yeah. And so, when I've actually, one of the things I did a couple weeks ago is on the back of my computer, on my desktop background, I created a new background and just trying to put down, it's just a picture of my family with, at the top, it just says my why, and it says why Life Bridge. And, it's something along the lines of, because the kingdom of God advances when churches are healthy. Right? So that's why I work at LifeBridge, to help LifeBridge be a healthy church that advances the kingdom of God. It said, why Providence Academy? Well, because our communities thrive when students are godly leaders, right? So then I want to give my life to help produce godly leaders. Well, why my family, right? Because my family flourishes when dad is well, when my family flourishes when they have a healthy husband and father. So
even
I want
CrossFit,
even the gym. Exactly. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, even the gym, to where you didn't just stay, doing the workout yourself, but you rose to the capacity of coach.
Right.
Why? Because when people are physically healthy,
that's exactly right.
The world flourishes better.
Yeah, that's right. Because people flourish when they're physically healthy. And so I have to be reminded of those things. Those are kind of the 4 key areas of my life that I'm involved in. I don't have a lot of time for anything else, outside of those. But I have to know that. And in each of those areas, I want my legacy to last beyond myself. And I guess history will be the judge, and the people in my life will be the judge of whether or not I've actually accomplished that. I can't define that or assess that myself. But that's my hope, is that in each one of those areas that I'll leave a legacy of hopefully investing in others that will last beyond my lifetime.
Yeah, I guess the way to sum it up is you're moving from success to significance.
Yeah.
Right, to where you've seen success in some of your own aspirations, but you want to move to significance, which is helping other people to be successful. And that's where that impact, that's where that legacy comes from, not just your own personal success, but when you start to reproduce that within others, which is really exciting.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Right. Hey, this is Kyle. Well done on your decision today to be great. Those are my kiddos in the background. Hey, if you want more of this kind of content, find me on social media. We'll keep the conversation going. You can hit me up on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, at StartWithWNTD. Again, at StartWithWNTD. We'll see you there.
So we got refills. Coffee's hot, delicious. Jake had squat day earlier this week, and he's feeling it. Milk was a bad choice.
Milk was a bad choice. Yeah, that's right.
Well, so let's get into it, man. Now that our listeners have a bit of a context for who you are, what you do, why you do it, talk to us. We'll get into a few failures here in a sec, but you've had successes in your life, man, and I think it's good to reflect on that, and I want you to do that for our listeners. As you look back over your life, over your journey, your story, your career, what are a few things that you did right?
Yeah, thanks. Well, first of all, I think the topic of your podcast really intrigued me, because failure is the one thing I've done really, really well. I've done it a lot. I think about my history in youth ministry. It was a process of constantly trying things and failing. You're just trying things and failing over and over and over. Yeah. And even things that would work for a while and then fail. And just so I think what I've tried to do, and I think one thing I've done well, is just constantly be a learner. I think something that comes to mind for me is I can always improve. and other people are always smarter than me. So that means I always have things to learn, and so I want to constantly be learning from experiences and people.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Appreciate that.
So I constantly want to be learning from experiences and from people. So I've tried to learn from my failures, and so I've never been, a slave to certain programs or strategies. It's always been a question of, okay, what's going to work? And if ideas need to be killed, sometimes we hang on to ideas too long.
Yep.
But just moving on, and then as far as learning from people, when I kind of transitioned into this leadership role at LifeBridge and moved into the preaching pastor role, one of the things that I did immediately was try to schedule meetings with other people who are in similar roles. And so to meet with other local pastors and just pick their brain about, hey, when you were making this transition, when you jumped into senior leadership at church, what things went well, what things didn't go well, and if you could go back, some of the questions that you've been asking, what would you do differently? And it was a great process. And besides the benefit of networking and building trust, hopefully with some local pastors, it gave me the chance to learn because I don't know everything, and so that's one thing, is just constantly being a learner.
I call it drinking from a fire hydrant. Just take it all in, baby.
Absolutely. And so in this process, like, leaning on other people has been super important for me. And even the people around me at LifeBridge, the elders at our church, Mike Tappa, who's our senior pastor, I've leaned on them a lot at times, and I think I don't see that as a weakness. I think that's a strength to recognize what you have in the resources of other people.
In an earlier episode, one of our guests said one of her what not to do's was, don't be afraid to not be okay. Don't be afraid to not be okay. Like, we so much try to go it alone on so many things, try to figure it out, and we don't want to admit when we actually need the help. And so it's awesome to hear that you've done a really good job in being able to lean on others. Like, I don't have it all figured out. Can I lean on you? Can I leverage your strength because I don't have it?
Absolutely. And there have been times where, even recently, where I've gone through experiences that, when you're in senior leadership in a church, and it's not something we talk about a lot, but you get hurt, and there are hurts that you accrue.
You have to deal with people.
You deal with people, and people are imperfect. And one of the unfortunate things that happens is, inevitably, I hurt people, and I have to apologize. And inevitably, people hurt me, and I have to forgive. And at times, it has been tough. And so having a personal friendship with guys like Mike has been invaluable for me, because I've been able to go to him and just say, Mike, it's been a hard week, and things kind of suck right now. And I know you've been through this stuff. And just to have a hand on the shoulder and like, hey, man, I love you. It's going to be all right. I got your back.
Someone who's been where you are.
Absolutely.
They're at, in a sense, the top of the mountain, and they're saying, hey, it's going to be okay. I can see it. I know you might not be able to see it, but I can see it. And to have someone like a sage or that kind of vision that can be there to guide you is huge.
It has been. In more ways than, at a younger age, I probably would have taken that for granted. And I think one of the things that I'm learning as I grow older is to rely on those relationships. Never take it for granted when you've got someone in your corner. Because there are seasons of life where you need it. And, I'm grateful that in God's providence, He's provided those people for me. Because there have been times where just knowing that someone's standing behind me saying, man, I got you, has been very powerful for me.
So that's interesting. So let's pivot into what you did wrong. So as you're thinking on that, I also want you to think on what you just said. You said, don't take people in your corner for granted.
Right.
And I think that's a great what not to do. Right? Because, sometimes we have our team out and stuff, but maybe we experience successes and we're getting rolling and we just forget the people that are actually there to help. And we take them for granted, or we mistreat them, or whatever it might be. And it comes back to hurt us, to hurt them. Can you riff on that a little bit? What do you mean when you say, don't take people in your corner for granted?
Yeah. So this is a great pivot into what
and it doesn't mean that this is
wrong.
One of your failures, but or maybe
no, it is absolutely one of the things that I've maybe done wrong at times is I've focused on tasks to the neglect of people.
Got it.
And maybe it's been easier for me sometimes to concentrate on the tasks I have ahead of me more than the people around me. And just the way that my brain works, I tend to very easily be preoccupied with the things I've got on the horizon. When I'm, for example, on a week-to-week basis, preparing sermons kind of every week, it's kind of constantly on my mind, and it's very easy for me to kind of go into a, laser-like focus on those things to the exclusion of the people that are around me. And oftentimes I've had to wrestle with, it's hard for me to give energy and focus to the people around me until my tasks are done.
Got it.
But one of the things that I think that is just kind of clarifying for me, as I said, as I get older, is that people are really the point. People are the point. And so the people that God's put around me, all of them are important. All of them have value. And all of them, we need each other in ways that we don't always know. And so when we take relationships for granted, we might be missing out on a relationship that is really going to be helpful and important. And so, neglecting relationships, I think about trajectory. If I were to continue in that pattern, play it out to an extreme, if I were to go throughout the whole course of my life focusing on tasks over people, where am I going to find myself in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, right? And will that build the kind of life that I want? No, it won't. The fruit of that will be that I'll be, probably miserable and lonely, and so instead recognizing that every person that's in my personal orbit is someone that's a gift, and one of the humbling things is, I'll give you an example. A couple of weeks ago, I walked into church on a Sunday morning, getting ready to preach, and someone asked me, just, hey, how's your week been? And this is someone that I don't talk to often, and I just said, not great. It hasn't been a great week. Yeah. And she stopped what she was doing. I said, hey, why don't you tell me more? And so I just shared with her about my week, and I didn't think anything of it, but then later in the week I got a message from her. She said, hey, listen, our conversation really stuck with me. Thanks so much for taking time to be real, because it encouraged me, and I've been praying for you this week. You know what I mean? And just recognizing that every person that God's put around me is a gift, and we need people.
So maybe a really good way to say it is, not only don't take people in your corner for granted, but don't forget that your work is about other people.
Right.
You're saying tasks versus people, and the tasks that you're doing are actually for the sake of other people.
Right.
But there's a way in which we can so prioritize those tasks that we are actually only doing them for ourselves. We forget that I'm doing these very things for the sake of others.
Right.
For the sake of others, I'm actually ignoring or forgetting or taking for granted.
That's right.
And it doesn't matter what line of work you're in, whether you're a pastor or the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, you have a product or service or something that you are giving to others. Yeah. So the nature of all work is for the sake of others.
Absolutely.
And it's important. The tasks are important. We need to get those things done. We want to do them well and with excellence because we're serving others. Yeah. But we shouldn't be doing those things at the expense of serving others. Absolutely. And that's what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think two things that just pop into my head immediately, and this maybe sounds bad, but I don't think it's as bad as it sounds, but you never know when you're going to need those people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You come across people every day that you may need to depend on later. And then the other thing it clarifies, for me then, as I've also heard people say, and forgive me, I don't remember where I've heard it, but people won't remember the things that you do as much as they remember the way that you made them feel.
Sounds like Instagram.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
TikTok.
But I really think it's true that we form impressions about people not objectively based on what they do. we form subjective responses to people based on how they make us feel. And certain people we learn very quickly are safe or unsafe. Right? Certain people are either cold or warm, and we know in very innate, distinct ways, because when you see someone in public, there's certain people that you respond to very positively, and then there's other people. I try to think about and this is kind of letting you deep into my brain. I try to live my life by the grocery store rule, which is this: I want to handle my personal relationships in such a way that there aren't people that I'm afraid to run into at the grocery store.
Interesting.
And I've succeeded at that sometimes, failed at other times. Admittedly, not all of my relationships are at that point, but what I want to do as much as I can is to live by that principle. And so, remembering how we make people feel is important, and I want people to know, and hopefully at some point in my life I could say that I've done this mostly well. People may not remember me as preaching the best sermons. They may not remember me as being the most knowledgeable on this subject or that subject, but what I hope they remember is that I made them feel worthwhile. It doesn't mean that maybe we agree on everything or that they agree with everything I've ever said, but little things like when I drop my kids off at school and I make the rounds and I get to talk to the teachers, I want the teachers to know that I know their names and feel encouraged when I'm around. And if there's little ways that I can serve them, I want them to know that. And just the other day I was talking to someone in the office while the kids were making their way down to chapel, and one of my favorite things to do is just stand there and just give the kids high fives and give them knucks on the way down to the chapel. And what do I hope they take from that? I hope they feel encouraged, feel loved. I hope they know that when they see Mr. Spielbauer hanging around the hallways that's someone that's cheering for them, and I want through my influence then for that to be contagious, hopefully. So that Providence becomes a place where people are excited. Or, likewise at church, my favorite part of Sunday mornings is when I'm done preaching and the congregation is singing the doxology at the end of the service, and I jet to the back door so that I can be there when people leave to shake their hand and just tell them I love them. Give them a hug. That's that's the best part of my Sunday. And what I hope that they take from that is they're not going to remember a lot of times what I've preached, but I want them to remember me as a guy who was there to give them a hug, shake their hand, and because a lot of people, we don't realize it, but people need that. People need others that are cheering for them, and that might be, you never know, that might be one of the only positive experiences that people have that week, and so those moments are precious.
You're giving yourself.
Yeah.
Giving yourself.
That's right.
That's awesome. All right, so a few things in there. Don't take people in your corner for granted. Something that's related, and I love this. Don't be afraid to run into others at the grocery store.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to think about that and how we live our lives in principle. What else, as you're kind of scanning your past, anything else that kind of surfaces to mind as a failure that you would readily say, don't do this?
Yeah, one of the glaring, I'll give you two. The one is real simple, and I haven't always been a good steward of my attitude. Our attitudes have a ripple effect, and you shape the mood around you. This is how we operate as human beings. We're social creatures. We're affected by our social environment, and for other people, you're their social environment, right? And so if you're negative, right, you create negativity, and that's not some weird abstract karma type thing. It's like that's just the social reality that you're creating for people around you. They're just going
to reflect what they see.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, but at the same time, if you're encouraging and uplifting, then you're creating that around you, and so you're constantly building an environment for others through your behavior and your actions. And there have been a lot of times where, here's an example. Oftentimes, I'm not upset with other people. I'll be upset at myself about something.
Sure.
And find out later that in a meeting or in a conversation that came across as, frustration towards someone else. And I've had to step back and be like, oh man, I wasn't even thinking about that. I wasn't thinking about that person or anything that they'd done. I wasn't frustrated with them. I was frustrated with myself about something. And so just learning to steward my attitude well, I think is something that I'm still learning, and I don't always do well. But, even in my home, Dad's attitude affects the climate of the household big time.
So how would you say that in like a don't do this type of way? Don't be a Grumpelstiltskin.
I'd say don't be an unwitting bulldozer.
Unwitting bulldozer.
There's some people whose personalities, without them realizing it, bulldoze the room around them. And at times I've been guilty of that. So don't be oblivious to how your attitude shapes the environment around you.
Interesting. And that's a really interesting picture, because you're saying that your attitude can level the room.
Yeah.
For good or for ill.
Absolutely. And I've been that at times, and I know it. And people gracefully have been willing to let me know when I've done that. So that's, I think, something to be aware of. The second thing I'd share, and I think this is you asked me a specific question kind of in preparation for this, and that was as you reflect on your story, and what are some of the big lessons you've learned. And as I look back, I can see that I have often been passive, and this is part of feeling pressure to make certain choices or make certain choose certain courses of action in life. Very often, I've viewed myself as passive, and that life is something that happens to me, right? Rather than something over which I can exercise control. So I think learning that I can make decisions, which sounds so fundamental, but I'm not a victim of circumstances. God has given me agency to choose, to do things. And, this sounds terrible, and, hear me out on this. It was a big mentality switch for me to realize I don't have to be a pastor. I don't have to. I could move my family to Hawaii tomorrow and just go live in a hut on the beach and surf every day. If I wanted to, I could do that.
Catch fish for dinner.
If I wanted to do that, I could do that tomorrow. My wife and I got a chance to take a vacation out of the country last fall, I guess, and as we were flying, I just realized it was our first real international trip together. I just realized, man, the world is so much bigger than me. And, if I wanted to just stop pastoring, stop doing those things, move to the other side of the world, I could do that. Nothing is stopping me.
Eat meat and cheese.
Eat meat and cheese, eat charcuterie on the coasts of Europe.
Red wine.
Yeah, right. And I could do that.
Good. Yeah.
And for me, that was really freeing to recognize, because then, in my mind, the mentality switch is, okay, I don't have to do that. So why am I doing it? I'm doing it because I want to, because it's important. And so for me, that's been a big mentality switch, is that I'm not a passive victim of the world around me. Now, don't hear me wrong. There are things that happen in our life over which we have no control.
Yeah.
And oftentimes life hits us in ways that we don't anticipate. We can't control those things, but we always have choice over how we respond and where we go from here.
So you'd say don't be a passive victim.
Yeah.
There's a saying that I've heard that goes something like, life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we react to it.
Yeah.
Therefore, we are in charge of our attitudes. And it's exactly what you're saying, where, there's a handful of things in life that we can't control.
Right.
But the outcome of our lives, the majority of our lives, is by how we react to those things.
Absolutely.
And so you're saying, don't be the passive victim. Just take action, be proactive, understand that you have a lot of choice, and the first choice, that domino effect choice that you have, is to have a good attitude no matter what happens.
Absolutely.
Right? And then go from there and let that domino effect be a constructive effect, not a destructive effect.
Right. And so thinking about how that might apply itself for someone in the workplace.
Yeah.
You are where you are. You're in the position you're in, but that doesn't stop you from excelling in what you do.
Right.
And you may feel like, hey, there's no room for me to get promoted, there's no room for advancement, whatever. Do the best at it. You have control. Yeah. And you know what? If there's no room for advancement, then work the best that you can to improve your resume, demonstrate exemplary work so that you can leverage it into a position somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah, right.
You provide so much value, and if the company's saying, hey, thanks, but no thanks, great. You still have a choice to stay there.
That's right.
Right? Like, you're not, I mean, it's, I think we ripped on this in the intro episode, but like, viewing failure as a friend or a foe. And it has to do with the choice. How are you going to see failure? You can, failure could be a really good friend, mentor, coach, teacher, right? Partner in your success.
Yeah.
Or it could be a foe.
Yeah.
And in your example there, if someone is discontent in their job and they've given it everything, well, what's keeping them from choosing to go elsewhere?
Right.
Is it a fear of, well, they couldn't, or a failure, or maybe it won't be, like that type of thing, rather than saying, look, I've given my all here, let's go. Like, and if I fail, then I fail, and we'll use that as a launching board, to propel, further. But like, sometimes that fear can be so paralyzing, and that's where you feel more comfortable playing the victim. Be like, well, I just can't do anything. Well, no, friend, you can do a lot more than what you think you can do in this situation. Yeah.
And I think you're onto something, because if I dig deep enough in my own thought process along the way, there's always been fear at the root of it. Yeah. My indecision has always been fueled by fear. Yeah. Fear of the unknown. Yeah. Fear of failure, of not doing things perfectly. And so then what I justify then is I justify my indecision by saying, well, I don't have control. Yeah. And so by denying control, there's no responsibility.
You wash your hands of it.
I wash my hands of it. Yeah. But I think the power of this is, Leonard Ravenhill said, a task without vision is drudgery. Yeah. And it's true. And so, if we're doing things without understanding of why, without understanding of ownership, stuff like that, it just leads to drudgery, it leads to misery. But again, kind of drawing on my experiences, taking agency and realizing I don't have to do what I do. I get to do what I do. I choose to do what I do has freed me up to do it passionately.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Hey, so you're still listening, which means you like it? I think so. If you do, share this with somebody else who you think would not only like it, but be helped by it, and join us in our mission to make the world be great.
So exactly kind of what you were just saying, we actually talked about this in the intro episode, and thinking about how should people view failure differently. We talked about one of the first things that people should do is assume total ownership of their failure, right? And it's in a sense you're saying a similar thing, like whatever your circumstance or your situation, assume total ownership.
Absolutely.
Even when things happen to you outside of your control, if you just try to wash your hands of the situation and say like, well, there's nothing I can do, what are you doing? You're shirking your freedom to choose, your responsibility, your ownership of yourself and how you're going to respond. And it can actually be really destructive. So like when people take that approach, they move from victim to owner, they're going to take ownership of the situation that maybe they couldn't control, but they can control how they're going to respond. And that's really the domino effect for the rest of their lives. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it can start with the smallest choice. Yeah. And you could never map out their lives by having them be like, well, why I made this little choice. I had no idea the rest of this was going to happen.
Right.
For good or for ill.
Right.
So in looking back in your life, what you did right, what you did wrong, how would you, if given a chance, how would you go back and do things differently? And another way to think about this question would be, let's say someone called you up, a young guy, 16 years old, Pastor Spielbauer, I love what you're doing. I love the impact you're having in the world. I can really see myself doing something like you've done. Where do I start? Where do I begin? What counsel, what advice would you give him to help him avoid some of the same mistakes that you've made along the way? Assuming you don't want him to have to, suffer.
Yeah. Number one is real easy for me, and that's if I could do things differently or give advice to someone who's kind of coming through the same route in life, it'd be work on yourself. Yeah. I wish that I had the ability to work on myself and my own emotional development more early in life. Yeah. Emotional development is huge, and understanding how to become self-aware and understand why you react the way that you do to certain things emotionally, and not to kind of sound self-helpy, but gaining self-knowledge. Why do I think the way that I do? And all of us are shaped by our environments. Growing up, all of us are shaped by our experiences, and we develop certain ways of thinking about the world that don't always match reality. And so, to give you some insight, kind of, I guess, to be really personal, I've always struggled with being someone with a pretty negative self-voice. So my inner narrative has always been supremely negative. Hey, Jake, you're a failure. Jake, you're gonna screw this up because you screw up everything. Right? Those are the types of things that my brain says to me, and that I've had to really heal from and learn from. Why do I think that way? That's not reality. Those things don't match reality. That's not who God designed me to be. Those things don't match up with the truth of His Word. Those aren't consistent with the way that Scripture teaches me to see the world.
Or maybe they're partially true, but half-truths are the best lies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So it's riffing on something, maybe you messed up here, did this wrong, but then taking and twisting it to be something that's completely not something that you aren't.
Right.
But selling you a narrative about yourself that it's tempting to want to buy into.
Right. And so, there's partial truth in that on my own, in my own power, and doing what seems right to me, I'll probably train wreck most things. But relying on the grace of Jesus Christ at work in me, I can do well, I can improve, I can be better, there is hope, and there's not condemnation. And so working through those things, and we all have that, we all have kind of these unwritten laws that we live by, and so knowing, kind of the false assumptions that we have, learning about our emotional triggers, working through, emotional trauma from our past, those are things that I wish that I had taken more seriously early on as a leader.
Yeah, know thyself, right? Sometimes there's a way in which we can go about that is a little bit goofy, right? Too introspective, too self-absorbed.
Absolutely.
But the other ditch is thinking that knowing yourself isn't important at all.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right. I think it is important that we take a healthy, balanced approach to understanding ourselves,
right?
Our own triggers, how we've become who we are today.
Yeah.
What's the good in that? What's the bad in that? Are we just assuming that everything is good? However we behave and respond is automatically just great?
Yeah.
Or we're saying, hey, no, what are some of these, dark strands in this tapestry of who I am? How'd they get there,
That's
and
right.
Is it right and good? What else if you could go back and do something different, or again counsel someone to help avoid some of your failures?
Yeah, I think the other thing that is really on my mind is clarifying your passions. I do believe that God's hardwired each of us with natural giftings, abilities, talents, and passions. And something that I always struggled with early on in life was figuring out what those are.
Yeah.
And if you'd asked me, 10 years ago, what are you passionate about? You probably gotten a blank, 10, 15 years ago, maybe going back a little further, you would have gotten a blank stare. And I don't know if I could have, right. Exactly, right. Skateboarding and playing Halo on the Xbox,
Punk rock.
But I don't know if I could have clarified some of those deeper questions about who I was hardwired to be and what really would make life meaningful and important. And, one of the things that we talk about is, people constantly, especially in student ministry, would ask me, well, what do I do with my life? And really calling is kind of at the intersection of God's word and your passions. And, just thinking through where do you find your opportunity and passions kind of intersecting is an important question. But, the big part of that is, what are you passionate about? Usually my first question to them is, what brings you fulfillment? What are the things that, you find meaning in pursuing? For some kids, it might be music, but we have to identify those passion areas. And finding, fulfilling work means really thinking through that intentionally. And that's something that I think I struggled with early on in life, was really clarifying my passions. And so that's something I've had to resolve early on.
So let me take a crack and guess that part of the reason that you struggle with that is because you didn't have someone leading you through how to think about that.
Right.
Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't know that, what I would have loved at that point in life would have really been, a mentor to challenge me in those areas, to think through my passions. And I think, I think my story would have looked a little different had I taken time to think through that. I had to kind of crash my way through some other avenues, some other routes in life to find where I'm at. Yeah. And, I often wonder, hey, I went to college, pursued a couple different undergraduate avenues. And if I'd really been attentive to the Lord at that point, if I had really stopped and had a deep awareness of, what God was calling me to do and how he had hardwired my passions, I wonder if that story would have looked a lot different, and would I then have had the opportunity to, pursue an undergrad at seminary, stuff like that, things I didn't have the opportunity to do because I was not yet thinking through intentionally where my passions were. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think the vast majority of people aren't clear on what they want in life,
right.
What they want out of life, where they're going in life. And in a world of options, it can be like you're sitting in the middle of an ocean and you can swim 360 different directions, right? And which one? And suddenly these options, they become more like chains and you start to drown.
That's right.
Right? And so this gets at the heart of the podcast here is when you're not sure what to do, when you're not sure which direction to swim in, when you're not sure what to do, start with, or not to do. It's one of many different mental models, lenses through which we can help to consider our options to make a decision. And it's not the only one, but it's a good place to start. And especially earlier in life, it's really helpful. Just like from a parent to a child, you don't want your kids to have to reinvent the wheel. You don't,
right.
Like if your foundation, you want them to build on top of your foundation, not tear down the foundation and start over from scratch. So that's just goofy. But yet, how many people are starting over from scratch every single generation, right? Or even if switch the paradigm instead of parent and child, think about just person and like who's come along in your life, coach, like athlete, like whatever it might be, pastor, church member, whatever it is. You get the picture there, and it's saying like, look, this life isn't just about us. Right? Like we actually are trying to build something here, and it means not reinventing the wheel. It means not tearing down what was put up before us. We need to build on top of that. Yeah. And so I think that's super important. And I think you're striking on kind of a soft spot for a lot of folks, right? Which is important. Work on yourself, clarify your passions. The earlier you can do that in life, the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I, on that too, I mean, obviously, sometimes things can shift and change and grow, right? Right. And that's okay. Things that you really enjoy doing or your desires, which drives behavior, those things might change, and that's okay. But what you're saying is make it a point to get clear early.
Yeah, that's right.
That's awesome.
All right, I'm curious. You tell me, which entrepreneur, which leader, which public figure do you want to hear from? Who do you want to sit down with me, not only share their successes, but lean into their failures? Why? To help equip you for success. Send me a note, tag them in this, have them reach out to me, and the sky's the limit. Let's go. Let's get who you want on What Not to Do.
All right, so we in life are inescapably influenced by so many different things, right? It's like growing up in a garden, right? And it's like you were saying earlier, just the things that we're exposed to, the people that we're exposed to, their attitudes, their demeanors, all that kind of stuff, they shape us directly, indirectly. So I'm curious, Jake, in your life, as you think back on your own personal formation, who you are today, and it could be positive influence or a negative influence that helped to get you to where you are today, but or direct or indirect, right? But who has been someone that's really shaped you, impacted you, helped to form you? Again, it could be someone that you knew in the flesh. It could be someone that you just digested all of their, lectures and books but never met. It could be someone, that told you you're never going to be anything in life, right? And you pushed through and overcame that. So for Jake Spielbauer, who has been one of the most impactful people in your life?
Do I get one or do I get a couple? If I make them quick.
Everyone probably has several.
Yeah.
But give us one, and if you feel moved,
I'm
to give us one.
I'm gonna cheat and I'm gonna give you more, but I'll give you one. There have been many people along the way who have, as I look back, been inescapably important in my development, and always just the right person at the right time in God's providence. one that sticks out in my mind is my freshman year of high school. I was walking through the halls, and if you knew me freshman year, I was just a punk kid, spiked belt, skateboarding t-shirts, whatever. And our principal, Mark Sheedy,
great guy,
who, I don't know how he even knew my name. I don't think I'd ever talked to him before. Pulled me aside, and out of nowhere, he just says, "Hey, Spielbauer, you're going to go one of two ways." He said, "You're going to keep going, with kind of with the crowd. You're going to keep going with the dudes you're running with right now, or you could really make something of yourself." He said, "You've got a lot of potential, and but the choice is up to you." And I don't remember the exact words used, but it was something along those lines, and that really stuck out to me. That was one of those things that I'll just never forget. As I look back on it now, even more as an adult, I'm just kind of amazed. I still don't know what possessed him in that moment, to pick me out and pull me aside. But in that moment, just reinforcing that I had choices to make, and so that's one that always sticks out in my mind.
Wow. Have you ever gotten back in touch with him?
Yeah, I have. I've run into him a couple times, and
did you remind him of what he said?
I don't. It's actually probably a good thing to think about that. I don't know if I ever responded to him and let him know that was meaningful to me. Yeah. But I probably should.
Sure, yeah.
And there are a number of people like that. I also remember my 8th grade teacher, Scott Conrad, science teacher, who found some things I'd written in the back of a notebook that were concerning. I was having a rough time. I struggled a lot with depression in middle school. And I don't, want to over dramatize it, but in my reality at that age, it was serious. I was very unhappy. There was in school there was the losers, and then there was the people that even the losers wouldn't talk to, and I was there. You know what I mean? And that's just kind of how it felt for me. And he pulled me aside one day and not confronted me, but just lovingly engaged me. Saw that I was in crisis, reached out to me, and it was embarrassing. But it was one of those things that may have proved to have been a lifesaver for me. So there's a couple conversations, thinking big picture, a couple other ones that I think deserve really important mention. Our senior pastor Mike Tappa. Mike, since day one, has spoken life into me, spoken vision over me, encouraged me to say, "Jake, hey, listen, you have all the makings of a senior leader in this church. I see this in you." Mike's the first one when I get done preaching to encourage me, stuff like that. And over the course of more than a decade now, has been someone setting the standard for me and pushing me forward. And when you think about, he's even used this language, thinking about every generation building on what came before them, Mike's always pushed the vision for me of going beyond even, wanting me to have an even better opportunity than he did coming into ministry. And so I'm grateful for him in that way.
Isn't that amazing, just the power of somebody's words to breathe life into you? And they cast a vision of a greater you than you even had for yourself.
Absolutely.
And it causes you to want to aspire up to that.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. I mean, just these one-off things, it's just incredible. And you're not alone. This isn't the first time I've heard, and our listeners have heard on previous podcasts, someone's, home ec teacher told them that they were never going to be anything in life.
Yeah.
Another 7th grade teacher came along and said, "Hey, you have so much potential," right? And helping to channel that energy into a certain direction. It shifts the course of somebody's life.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Absolutely.
And we should try to be more like that. Think about who we can speak life into. And sometimes it's just one of those one-off things. We might forget ourselves. Yeah. Maybe Mark Sheedy forgot that he ever said that to you. But look. It's impressed upon you, and it's helped to shape you, and helped you to aspire to be a greater man today. And that's just amazing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I, again, those are things that I could have never, known that I needed at the time, but proved to be invaluable. The last one that I just have to, get off my chest and say is, I would also point to Tolkien. I've been a huge Tolkien fan. I've read everything I can get my hands on by J.R.R. Tolkien. And, when I was a young kid, reading was kind of my escape. It was my go-to. And, I think it's really important. Not everyone's a big sci-fi fantasy person. I get that. But I think the power of imagination is really important in the creative process, in being a leader. And so reading things like that just stoke imagination. And
obviously, if for some reason our listeners aren't familiar, Tolkien wrote the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the Hobbit trilogy. He's written other stuff, and his son Christopher Tolkien recently passed away. Yeah, but helped to continue on that legacy, and good stuff.
All right, so you tell me, do we need more conversations like this? Do we need more folks helping us to consider failure as a friend or a foe, and helping us to avoid the same pitfalls and failures that they made so that we can go further, faster in our own journey towards success? If this is worth it to you and you want to put your money where your mouth is, you can really help us out over at patreon.com/whatnottodO, and feel free to give as much as you think that this project is worthy of your support, and anything that you're willing to give. It's such a blessing to us, and thank you.
All right, Jake, so I'm curious. You're sitting at Copper State, Hack Command work. You hear, Bobby over at table 7 tell his buddy, Steve, hey, you should do this. And you stop, the hair on the back of your neck stands up, your blood, your veins are pulsing. It's the worst advice you've ever heard. And you want to just get over there and wring Bobby's neck and say, no, that's the worst advice. What is some of the worst advice you're hearing maybe floating around these days, or maybe that you've been given at an earlier point in life?
Yeah, so this is going to seem like low-hanging fruit, but I think about it as like the Elsa principle from Frozen, right? It's the idea of just follow your heart. Just follow your heart. And that might seem like hypocritical because I just said earlier to clarify your passions, but those are different things.
Yeah, so clarify that for us.
Yeah, so, I think we live in a culture that prioritizes and celebrates individual emotionalism, right? So whatever seems right to you in the moment, do it. You're entitled to do it, and it should be celebrated. Yeah. And so what happens is, you think about with a navigational system, if you made decisions about where you were driving just based on which street looked most appealing at the time, you'd never get anywhere meaningful. It's only by having a destination, having a principle or a route that you ever get where you intend to go. And so I think one of the great failings of our day, and this may seem like a soapbox, but is that we very much stopped being people of principle and have become people of emotion. And that's not to say that emotions are evil. Emotions are great. And they're part of how God's hardwired us to interact with reality. They're ways that we engage with God and engage with others. But as a guide, they can be deceiving. And so, Proverbs says, in his heart a man makes his plans, but the Lord determines his steps. Or in other places says that there's a way that seems right to a man, right? But the way that seems right to man isn't always, in the moment, what's going to produce the best results or the most long-term fruit. And so I really think that success in life involves seeing beyond your immediate circumstances to make decisions based on principle. And so I think, again, that's one of the great failings of our day is we've stopped being able to think in terms of what is right, what will produce lasting fruit, and have instead substituted that for the lazy, kind of cheaper version, which is what feels good right now. And I think that that's something that, over the course of a life can end up being extremely destructive.
Yeah, that would be... Well, so one of the ways I've learned how to think about that is, if passion is a horse, reason or logic is the bridle. Yeah. Right? And so, if you just had an unbridled passion, okay. Yeah. I can go anywhere. Yeah. But you put a bridle on that and think about the power and the way that you can channel that energy.
Right.
And that's really, really important. And then your distinction, I think, is important between passion and just sheer emotion.
Right.
And so maybe another way to talk about passion are the things that you enjoy. What are some of the desires that you have? Because desire is ultimately driving behavior. Absolutely. Right? And our desires are formed and shaped. So if you're going to get clear on the things that you enjoy doing, if you're going to be doing them the rest of your life, and that kind of coincides with your quote from Leonard Ravenhill. Yeah, Leonard Ravenhill. A task without vision is drudgery, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, no, you have a clear vision. You need to enjoy the work that you're doing. Otherwise, go find something else. And there are varying degrees in which we can learn to enjoy the work. We can become more passionate and probably do the better that we get at it.
Right.
And so you're not discounting those things. You're saying don't be the person who just follows every single emotional whim, because it's just going to be really destructive. You're going to hurt yourself. You're going to hurt others. Yeah. And it's just, it doesn't take much to find some proverbs, modern day parables. Just you look around and how many people are just, following whatever they feel like doing.
They're shipwrecked by, I guess, what's the word? Impetuous thinking, right? So just impulsive, reactionary decision making. And this goes back to, again, are we passive or are we active? Right. Are we acting in life or are we reacting? Right. Am I reacting to my circumstances, or am I acting, stepping proactively into the future? And you made a great point. Living impulsively like that is a great way to destroy the people around you, and to find yourself in places in life that are not going to lead to flourishing for yourself or others.
Yeah, you're ultimately destroying yourself.
Yeah.
Just to live recklessly, emotionally, whatever you feel like doing, whenever you feel like doing it. Yeah. You're kicking against any kind of discipline or self-government, which is ultimately anarchy.
Right. And again, this is not going to be surprising coming from a pastor, but all of us need something fixed and firm to which we attach ourselves. And emotions are shifting sand, and which don't lead to stability. We need something to build on that's unchanging, unmoving. And obviously, I believe that's Jesus Christ. I believe that's the Word of God. And not only the Word of God, Jesus incarnate, but also the words of God, which would be Scripture. Those provide the foundation for my life. And provide me with a source of truth that allows me to assess what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling in the moment. The Apostle Paul talks about taking every thought captive and holding it up for comparison with the knowledge of Jesus Christ. Well, what does that mean? It means God's words provide me with an ability to fact check my own emotions with true reality and to make reasoned decisions. And so someone listening to this who maybe doesn't share my faith or my convictions about Christ or about God's Word, I guess what I would encourage is, obviously, I would say, well, that's worth exploring, right? I believe that that's not just true for me. I believe that the truth of Jesus Christ is true for all of us.
Or because you believe it's true, you'd want other people to believe it as
absolutely.
Well.
And but here's the deal: even if you maybe are not at that point and wouldn't share those same assumptions, what I would say is, you do need to develop a habit of stepping back to have moments of quiet and consideration and introspection to really reflect on the things that are important in life. There's a discipline to solitude sometimes and to thinking intentionally about these things. So make space in your life to be able to step back and get away from the heat of the moment and the heat of passionate, quick, emotional decision making to really reflect on what is important. Not everybody has developed this, I guess, reflex in their life, but having a constant reflex to step back, to get away, maybe to journal or to write and to clarify what's important to me, where am I going, and doing that consistently over the course of your life.
Yeah, the emotions need to be tethered to something. Otherwise, they just fly away. Right? And they'll take you with them. So have them anchored in truth is what you're arguing for, and you're saying the truth is the truth of God's Word. Have the emotions anchored in truth, logic, reason, the rational part. And it's interesting, like in Simon Sinek's book, I start with why. He talks about that. He talks about how the cortex surrounds the limbic brain. The limbic brain is that where we're inspired, more emotional, that kind of gut feeling that we have. And then the cortex is the rational, logical part, and it kind of filters through that. And I think both are important. One of my favorite pictures is the idea of passion being a horse, and the bridle being knowledge. Yeah. Right? Like, passion is so good, and that kind of energy is good, but unharnessed, unchanneled, it can be destructive. Yeah. We see examples of that all throughout history. Absolutely. We see examples of that in our own lives, right? So that's really, really good. Don't follow your heart. That's Disney for you. Yeah, right. All right, man. So it's rush hour. Every major city throughout the world, they're all listening to What Not to Do, right? Because it's the world's famous, most famous podcast, and but it's a traffic jam. They're all stopped. They look up and they see a billboard. It's your billboard. Yeah. What message do they see? What message do you want the world to see?
Man, that's a tough one. So I would maybe not selfishly, but my natural reaction is Jesus saves. That's my story. In a nutshell. If we're looking for kind of practical wisdom, I'd say take ownership. Take ownership. I'm trying to do that and learn that in my life. But just take ownership. Take ownership to be better. Where you're at today doesn't determine where you're at tomorrow. And one of the things that I've constantly had to remind myself, because of my tendency to reflect on the past, is I can't change what happened yesterday. I can't change anything that happened in my life up until right now. It's all done. It's written. What I can do something about is what I do from here, right now, starting today. That's going to change tomorrow. And that may sound cliche, but there's so much freedom in recognizing that. Like, how much of our wasted energy goes into thinking about the past and obsessing about the past? And we need to recognize you can't change it. That part of the book is written, but the rest falls to you. And, if we're going to use a real cheesy metaphor for it, the pen's in your hand. Take ownership. What are you going to write? And the thing that I think is striking in that is we don't know how many pages are left. God is sovereign. I could be gone tomorrow. What am I going to do today? So take ownership. And I guess that would probably be the simplest way to do it.
Well said.
Friends, the pen is in your hand. Are you taking ownership for your story, for your life? All right, so let's recap here. The first thing that Jake told us was don't take people in your corner for granted. There's a way in which we can focus on our tasks over against the people for whom we're doing the tasks, right? So as important as the tasks are in that they are in service to someone else, whether it's through your work or hobbies or your family, etc., don't let that come at the expense of the people that you're serving over against it. And I think Jake had some really, really good examples and thoughts there. So if you want to refresh there, hit rewind. Secondly, don't be afraid to run into others at the grocery store. This is the grocery store principle. I love this one from Jake. Really cool. Never heard of it before, but it makes total sense. Wherever you are out in public, you should want to be as much as you can be at peace with others, that you're not trying to avoid them at the grocery store. Like, oh, they're aisle 9, Steve's over there. We can't go that way. Just be at peace with people as much as it's in your ability to do so. And lastly, number 3, don't be an unwitting bulldozer. There's a way in which we can, our presence, our attitude, our personality can just completely floor a room in a destructive sense, right? And we need to be more self-aware, be more conscious of who we are and the weight which we carry, so we're not coming in like a bull in a china shop, or in Jake's analogy here, a bulldozer. All right, and Jake gave us a bonus one here, free of charge, not going to cost you anything. Don't be a passive victim. Remember what he said, the pen is in your hand. Take ownership. Assume total ownership for your life, for your story. No excuses. All right, well, I want to thank you so much for listening. And remember, this is about you, and this is for you. So well done on tuning in and listening. I assume that you're taking ownership of your life because you're listening to something like this. You're wanting to glean from the lives of other people's experience. You want to glean from their story so that you can apply it to your own life and hopefully avoid the mistakes. And if you are finding a lot of value and being helped by this, go help somebody else. Share this podcast with them and help us in our mission to help others, even the world, be great. Connect with us. I would love to hear who you want on this podcast. No name too small, no name too big. Tag me, tag them, shoot me a DM, leave it in the comments. Let's get them on the show. It'll be awesome. And connect with us on social media as well too. You can hit up Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. It's at startwithWNTD, at startwithWNTD. Check out the website, startwithWNTD.com, and we'll have all the podcasts live there, etc., and more. Well, it's been said that good men learn from their own mistakes, but great men, they learn from the mistakes of others. So go and be great, and we'll see you next time.